30 kilometers away from Belarus, Republic Media Network has reached another bombing site. What you see behind me is a house that was completely demolished in an aerial bombardment. In fact, a 500-kilogram bomb was dropped by the Russians around 2:30 in the morning. About 30 households in this area called Ovruch has been completely demolished. What you see is the remains of this very household. In fact, on the other side, if I can just show you how the damage has actually taken place. In fact, this place where we are broadcasting right now from is not very far from Belarus. It's just about 30 kilometers. So it's pretty much the border of Ukraine and Belarus. And see the kind of damage that has taken place. And just a short while ago, a breaking news also coming in how the General Staff of the Armed Forces here in Ukraine has now confirmed that Belarus is already participating in the war. In fact, they have allied with the Russians. The Russians are now using their territory as full scale for the full-scale war that is taking place. Let me just quickly take you through some of the images that we are getting you every hour. In fact, we are the only network. We have covered over 15 such locations. We have now come right to the tip of the northern border of Ukraine, the very axis that has become extremely crucial for the Russian armed forces. In fact, this is the very axis that we are being told has been taken by the Russian army. That is the reason why this is the kind of destruction that you are essentially seeing. It is late at night when the kind of bombing actually has been taking place. Around 2:30 in the morning, we are being told that the Russian army has dropped about 500 kilograms of bomb. And look at the kind of destruction that has taken place in the entire area. If you take a look at the other side of the building, what you see right now is the impact of the bombing, where houses have been completely damaged, window panes have been broken. These are the very places where people have still been living. But what you see is that large-scale destruction and also the civilian losses that have lives that have been lost in this kind of aerial bombardment that's been taking place. What's important to point out here is that 3 airfields, which are not very far, 3 airfields in Belarus, which have become very, very active. Important to state here is that you have the state-of-art equipments that are being used by the Russian army. And the fact is that continuously over the last 2 to 3 days, we are seeing that the northern Ukrainian part, as I go a little closer and show you the kind of damage that has taken place, the craters that have been created. Take a look at this area. There was a house here which is now been, what you see right now, this very area was the place where a house was there. That area, there was a house which now, as you can see, it's all in dust. That's all that remains of this particular house. I'm sorry I'm not being able to also communicate better because one, it's been very difficult for us also to move from one location to the other to get you these kind of reports, and also the fact that it's also been very overwhelming to see these kind of images continuously over the last 13 days. And time and again what we are seeing is that civilian houses have been targeted by the Russian army. What I'll try and do is, let me try and go across to the other side. I'll ask Rawatji also to come along with me and try and show you, give you images a little closer so that you understand what's really happened. So it's not just the front side. Take a look at this. Take a look at what has happened. These are not small houses that have been targeted. These are places where you would have a lot more number of people who have been living here. And as you see, one after the other, scores of houses in one row have completely been damaged. As you see here, as I go a little closer and try and show you the kind of bombardment that has taken place, resulting in this kind of damage. Here, as I go a little closer to show you what remains of this particular house. As you see, this area is a little blocked. We'll try and see if we can go here and get you those images. Now these JCB machines have been brought in so that the debris can be cleared, and we have seen that the authorities here, they're trying to work 24/7 to ensure that these areas are not really blocked, because important to highlight here is that these areas have multiple checkpoints that have been installed by the Ukrainian army, so that the movement of the Russian troops can certainly be slowed down. Take a look at that house on the other side. That house has also been damaged. So every area that we have been going to. Today itself, this is the second location where we have reached. And let me just tell our viewers a little bit while Ravaji stays with those visuals. I'll ask him to stay with the visuals as I take you through some details that we are picking up in terms of what exactly is the Ukrainian army saying with regards to the nature of the bombardments that have taken place, and which are the battlefields that have been activated by the Russian Federation, because we are being told that Belarus is playing a very critical role at this point in time. In fact, they are saying that there are signs of readiness of the military political leadership of the Republic of Belarus for possible large-scale participation of the armed forces of the Republic of Belarus in hostilities against Ukraine on the side of the Russian Federation. So all of this is right now possible because, remember, the proximity of these areas to Belarus, and the fact of the matter is that they are now being activated to this particular extent. And some details that they have given of the areas, the border checkpoints, we are being told there is a place called Oleksandrivka. Now, Oleksandrivka is a place in Belarus, not very far from where we are broadcasting right now, where they have brought in the BTGs, the battle tactical groups have been brought in, and those battle tactical groups are playing a crucial role in this battle, because it was all this while what we were witnessing was the BTGs were limited to a particular location in and around Kiev, but now the BTGs have been taken into Belarus. And why it is very important, these two BTGs in 38 units of BTGs that have been brought by the Russian army on the Belarus border indicates that they are upping the ante. And their focus right now remains these very areas where civilian areas are constantly being targeted by the Russian army. And if Belarus gives that kind of support that is needed, then of course the damage, the destruction is only going to increase. Remember, on the one hand, we are looking at how the pressure is also being built on Russia. Many would say that we are talking about the economic sanctions, but how has it really helped the Ukrainians at this stage? Because on the one hand, you've seen the frustration that has been shown by the president of Ukraine when it comes to NATO. They've already not got the kind of, they haven't really got the kind of support that they had expected from NATO in terms of the no-fly out zone. And if that would have happened, then perhaps things would have been a little different than what it is right now. Because when you have an open sky and the fact that your air defense system isn't that strong, then perhaps avoiding these kind of damage becomes even more difficult. And that's where the Ukrainians are finding it very, very difficult. Russia, of course, is also bleeding along with Ukraine. But that's on a different note. That is affecting certainly the Russian oligarchs. It is affecting the economy of Russia when you have global brands withdrawing from Russia. But what you see right now is that there is no immediate relief as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, because it's the civilians who are being targeted time and again. And as I have been pointing out, that the significance of the area from where we are reporting. Now, as the information that we've had, this area, for all our viewers to understand, if you take a look at the map of Ukraine, this is right at the tip of Ukraine and Belarus border. We are just about 30 kilometers. So we are extremely close to the very place where the mobilization of the Russian troops have taken place. You have the battalion tactical groups, about 38 such units of the battalion tactical groups that have been mobilized just at the border of Belarus. And not to forget, the Russian Federation has also activated their air force way more than what they had in the first few days of the invasion. So that is the reason why perhaps you are seeing these areas just close to the Belarus border, these areas are being constantly attacked. Just about an hour ago, we had sent in a report from Korostan. Now, Korostan is again on the same very axis that we have been talking about, the northern axis. And just to understand, as you basically take that particular highway, the Zhytomyr highway, you are closing into Kiev. So for the ground forces of the Russian Federation to enter, they essentially need a far more easier route or a clean route so that they can reach Kiev and the offensive can be increased, which would essentially mean that if there is a regrouping, if there is a mobilization that they require, if that takes place, then it's going to be difficult for the Ukrainians to be able to hold fort, especially in Kiev region itself, while there has been a large-scale battle that's taking place. But what's happening in the process is that while all of this is taking place, a lot of appeals that have been made by the Ukrainians is that at least civilian areas shouldn't be targeted. You've had the Ukrainian president talking about the fact that how, because no action has been taken by the West, no action has really been taken by the NATO, that's the reason why you are looking at civilian areas closer to the borders being attacked time and again. Take a look at the kind of damage that's taken place. A car that's topsy-turvy at this point. There is a house here which has been down to rubble. Take a look at this. A large house perhaps, and this is all that remains, just half part of the house that remains right now. And in this area, a total of 30 households is what we've been told have been attacked. And the local administration with whom we just spoke to before we began our broadcast, they are telling us that this is the entire weight is about 500 kilograms. Here the gentleman is showing us, this is what you see. This is just a part of the bomb that was dropped. Take a look at this. Just like the same images that we showed you in Zhytomyr, this is the same issue. A heavy part of the bomb that has now been taken and has been collected by the district authorities. They would be taking it and collecting it because they're saying that this is part of the evidence that they gather if there is any sort of denial that has been made by the Russian Federation on a global front. Because remember, for them it would become important that they are able to establish that this is from the Russian side. Because if you go by the counter claim that has been made by the Russians have been saying that they haven't carried out any of these attacks or these strikes from their side. In fact, they're blaming it on the Ukrainian air defense system, saying that their own missiles have struck some of the villages in some parts of Ukraine. Now that's largely the claim that has been made by the Russian side. So that's the reason why whenever we are going to such sites, what we are witnessing is the fact that they're collecting these parts of the bomb. They're collecting these parts of the bomb and keeping it with the district administration in most of the places that we have actually gone to. And only to try and build a proper case that these attacks are primarily being carried out by none other than the Russians. Just staying with these images, because these are very powerful images that will actually tell you the reality of the war between Ukraine and Russia. For all those, when this war actually began, with the kind of a statement that was made by the Russian president about the fact that this was an attempt that was made by the Russian to try and free the people of Ukraine from a Nazi regime, from the cabal of drug addicts, and the fact that he was trying to free the people of Ukraine from a torturous regime, and that these are military operations that are going to be limited only to the eastern side, or rather the Donbas region. But today, where we are standing on the northern side of Ukraine and closer to Belarus, as I was pointing out, 30 kilometers from Belarus. And what you're seeing just behind me are images of destruction that was caused because of the aerial bombardment. And as I've been saying, while we've not really seen the kind of focus that should be, especially when you have an army carrying out large-scale destruction or attacks, pinpoint attacks on civilian areas, there has to be some sort of a global clamor that will peace be given a chance. At this stage, doesn't really look like that peace would be given the chance that it should be. And more importantly, both sides have had their own fixed positions. Ukraine, on the one side, they said that they are willing to have direct negotiations with Russia. Russia says that they are also willing to have that kind of negotiation. But yes, they've said that there would be some conditions. And those conditions are pertaining to one, a change in the constitution of Ukraine that is going to give the assurance to Russia that Ukraine is not going to be siding with any sort of bloc, which was basically an indication about the NATO membership. Then you have about the recognition of Crimea. You have the recognition of the separatist regions on the eastern side of Ukraine, of Donetsk and Lugansk. But these are conditions which the Ukrainians have said no to. But what's the way out? Every day that we are trying to document the kind of destruction with the sole purpose that the world needs to wake up and see what's really happening here in Ukraine, where civilians are losing their lives. And as I have been pointing out, while we do not have the exact data of the number of casualties that have been caused because of these aerial bombardments, but the fact of the matter is that from these kind of destruction, it is quite evident that large number of people may have lost their lives. At least if you take a look at it, the local administration in this area suggesting that about 30 households have been destroyed. And look at people still standing here taking whatever is not been damaged because of the bombardment. They're trying to take that, collect it, and perhaps leave from the area. These are similar images that we have been seeing over the last few days. And as I said, with this location, this is the 16th such location that we have come to where the bombing has actually taken place. And this doesn't seem to be nearing any end at this point in time. Well, in fact, let me try and do something and just go a little closer to the crater that has been created. Well, I think so. This must have been covered from the time that the rescue operation or the operations that have been carried out by the district authorities to try and level this area, so that the movement in this area becomes a little easier. Because these households, if I can tell you, they are just on the road itself. So for any kind of army movement also to take place, it is essential that the area is basically cleared off. And as I've been pointing out, the significance of this particular access, while there hasn't been a lot of focus, what should have otherwise been, why it becomes very important, why it becomes even more significant, that this is the very axis that the Russians are really focusing in. And while the global media is busy telling everyone about what's the situation in Kiev, there hasn't been the kind of focus one should be giving to what really happens when there is an unabated war that is going on, a full-fledged war that is going on, and how the civilians are being affected. And these are areas which are far off. And as I've been saying, we've been traveling on a daily basis over thousands and thousands of kilometers just to try and document these places. They are far off. They are nowhere near, this place at least is nowhere near Kiev. It takes about a good few hours for the troops to actually reach Kiev. This is very close to Belarus, 30 kilometers away from Belarus. So the nearest city, if I may say so, from Belarus, which has been targeted. Of course, it becomes far more easier for the Russians to carry out attacks in these areas because it would perhaps take just few minutes for the fighter jets to take off from an airfield in Belarus and then perhaps reach areas, civilian areas on the Ukrainian side. And with a confirmation just minutes before we reached here, the Ukrainians have now confirmed that Belarus has officially become part of this war. They've sided with the Russians, and the fact that they've allowed the Russians to bring in, or rather mobilize themselves on the Belarus side, where they've brought in the battalion tactical groups, which is basically the more specialized groups that have been brought in by the Russian Federation, which would mean that in the days to come, the offensive from the Russian side would only increase, which would also mean that if the Russians now want to send in more of their troops through Belarus and try and enter Ukraine through the northern axis, it would become far more easier than what it was. This is something that the Ukrainians already suspect. So that is the reason why if you take a look at some of the areas, which is very difficult to film right now because there are a lot more checkpoints, lot more permissions to be taken before we reach even locations like these, you would find almost every checkpoint completely fortified. You would have a bunker that has been created, sacks of bags that have been kept at those checkpoints, and a lot more checking that is taking place, passports being checked. Even Ukrainians have to now show their passports when they are crossing those checkpoints because they suspect that the Russians have now started to intermingle with the local population. We have also had some reports of Russians actually opening fire on civilians. Civilians have been targeted without any sort of warning. The Russians have opened fire on civilians who were moving from one place to the other. And how things are changing right now is that Russians also believe that, it's the Ukrainians who believe that the Russians have also brought in what they call the psychological combat units. Very difficult to verify this claim, but this is a claim in which the Ukrainians are saying that when these Russian psychological combat units have come into the picture, they are now trying to send across messages among the local population, especially in the areas where they have taken control, like in Cherniv, in Sumy, in Kharkiv, where they're trying to tell the local population that that Ukraine perhaps will not be able to take up this fight. They'll not be able to sustain the fight. There is no support that the Ukrainians are really getting at this point in time. And that's something that the Ukrainians are trying to they've already rejected those kind of rumors that have been doing the rounds. You've had the president coming up and saying the video message that he had put out late last night, which has certainly become viral. It has reached a lot of people, where President Zelensky is saying that he's not going to leave Kiev, and this is a battle that they are going to win simply because of the fortitude that has been shown by the people of Ukraine, and more importantly, that he's now taken slightly aggressive positioning. You've seen the kind of statements that he has made with regards to NATO, with regards to the role that the West has played, calling in for a ban as far as the Russian oil is concerned. But that is again something that we haven't really seen the kind of support one would have expected. Germany has already made it abundantly clear that they're not going to be part of that ban that they've been talking about as far as oil and gas supply is concerned, because once again, if that happens, Russia has already threatened that they are going to stop the gas supply to European Union. So somewhere down the line, what Ukraine was really expecting in the first few days of the invasion, it's not really happening right now. It's a little different than what it was. So there is the element of frustration that you can see among the top leadership of Ukraine at this point in time. And they're hoping that beyond the military aid that has been promised, there would be some concrete action that would be taken by the West in order to help, in order to protect Ukraine. Because if that does not happen, then what you see around me, this is just going to continue. And as I've been pointing out, most of the places where which remained untouched in the initial few days of the invasion, it's just going to become like this. you have untouched areas now being targeted by the Russian Federation. And the fact that you have Belarus, a country which shares a large boundary with Ukraine, participating in the war and now aligning with Russia, which would only mean bad news for Ukraine. Because if Russia has full access to almost every resource of Belarus, which would mean that there is a direct access that Russia has from a large northern border. So you're looking at some of the areas like Lutsk, you're looking at another area called Rivne, and of course the place where we are, Zhytomyr and Ovruch, the very place from where we are broadcasting from. These are places which would have direct access from Belarus, which would mean that the Russian troops can enter from any side they wish to. And for the Ukrainians, it would be opening up many fronts. And if that really happens, remember, it's going to be very, very difficult for the Ukrainians to hold fort at this point in time. However, having said that, they have undoubtedly shown the kind of resistance. In fact, they've also questioned the fact that Russia, which has been touted as having one of the most powerful army, they haven't really been able to carry out the siege that they wanted of Kiev. And we have entered the 13th day, so things seem to be very different than what it was initially. The initial reports which had suggested that this war perhaps is not going to continue for very long and the Russians would emerge victorious, but that's not really happening, at least on the ground. That's not what we are witnessing. While the Ukrainians may have been successful in the pushback to the Russians, but what is really happening is that in the process, a lot more lives are being lost. Continuously from one place to the other that we have been going. As I've been saying, that our team, starting from all the way from eastern Ukraine, all the way from eastern Ukraine to western side to southern, and now we've reached the northern Ukraine, and we are seeing that almost every, if you take the map of Ukraine, every district of Ukraine has now been targeted. May not be many a times, may not be exactly like what's happening in Kharkiv where the shelling is taking place every day. But the fact of the matter is that there is nothing that is left untouched by the Russians. Almost every district has seen some bombing or the other that has taken place. Yes, in some areas where the military bases are the prime focus, say for instance in Vinnytsia, which is a little down south. In Vinnytsia, it was the military base that was targeted. In Klemensky, we are told there was another airport or an airfield that was targeted. Up north, we are seeing that it's not really military bases. It's up north or closer to Belarus border. It's largely the local population or areas where you would have much more civilians staying. Those are the areas which are now being targeted. As you see, what's happening behind me is right now the local authorities, these JCBs now being brought in, and they're trying to clear off the debris. That's the mangled remains of a car that must have been parked in the area when the bombing took place. And as I'm being told by the locals that what you are seeing right now is just half part of the house. There was another house before, which as you see is in rubbles right now. This is the very place where another house was there, and there is nothing to indicate that there was one before the bombing took place. So you can perhaps gauge the power of that bomb that was dropped. The local authorities claim that it is a 500 kilogram of bomb that was dropped, and we showed you a small part of the bomb that has been recovered by the authorities while they were clearing of the debris, which is now going to be taken by the district administration, and they are going to keep it with them. And we have seen that in almost every area when they're trying to clear off the debris. That's when these bombs, parts of these bombs are basically taken away and then they are kept. So all in all, if I can sum it up for all our viewers who are tuning in right now of what we have seen, what we have been doing over the last few days, we've been going to almost every area where a bombing has actually taken place, trying to speak to the local administration, trying to speak to the local population to try and understand what's really happening on the ground. And while we are doing that, let me also tell you that there is a strong sort of resistance that has been put up by the Ukrainians right now. A lot of people who have been here, they're saying that we never had the time to leave from these places, or even if we wanted to, we couldn't have done that because we do not have the option perhaps to try and go to safer locations because there is no such option available before them. That's the reason why you would find a lot of places where we have gone to in the last 24 to 48 hours, we have seen casualties, we have seen civil population being targeted, children being targeted, women being targeted, schools, colleges, all of that have been targeted. Let me stay with those images as the district administration tries to clear off the debris. We'll try and get you more information right now of what's really happened. Now, I can also take you through some of the details that we have picked up from the administration just a short while ago with regards to the operations that are being carried out. Let me just take you through some of the details, particularly as far as participation of Belarus is concerned. Now, this is what the Ukrainians are saying. 30 kilometers is where 30 kilometers away from Belarus is where we are, and not very far on the other side is a place in Belarus called the Alexandrivka. Now, that is the place where the Russians have been able to mobilize and bring in what they call the battalion tactical groups. There are about 38 such units, and they have transferred a higher level of combat readiness. But once again, what the Ukrainians are claiming that these are community units of the Russian army, 29, 35, 36A, and all of them have been brought in closer to the border areas. And if I can take you also through some of the details of which are the other areas where you're looking at the intense battle that's taking place, and which are the areas that the Russians have been able to capture. Sumy, if you look at it, that's on the eastern side, closer to Kharkiv, which now we are being told is a Russian-controlled territory. Then you also have Cherniv, which is again on the eastern side. That is also now under the Russian control. And up north here in Kiev, there is a small portion of the Kiev Oblast area where the Russians have been able to take more control. Let me also go across to my colleague Mridul. We are trying to just go to the place where the exact location where the bomb was actually dropped. We'll try and go. Mridul has been able to spot it. We'll try and go across to that very place and see what really happened, because that's where the impact took place, and that's why you see in this household, as we stay here, all the glass panes, the window panes that have been broken. So this looks like a complete residential area to me where the bombing actually took place, and we've just reached a place. I'm told that this is where the exact place where the bomb was dropped. So let's try and just go a little closer to get an exact look of what's really happened. Let me also bring in Mridul. Mridul, आप कुछ बता रहे थे कितने?
बिल्कुल, मैं श्रवण आपको बता दूं कि 3 बम यहाँ पर गिरे हुए हैं, और जो मेरे पास जानकारी पहुंची है 3 बम यहाँ पर गिरे हैं। और ये वो इलाका है जो सोवियत संघ का जब नक्शा था तो यहाँ पर आर्मी का बेस कैंप हुआ करता था, जो आपको सामने तस्वीरों में दिखाई दे रहा होगा। इसीलिए यहाँ पर बम फेंके गए। एक ये जगह है, दूसरी जगह वो है। पहली जगह ये है, करीब 20 से 30 फीट का एक गड्ढा होगा। दूसरा वो गड्ढा है जहाँ पर दूसरा बम गिरा था, वो भी। और तीसरा आपके ठीक पीछे है। 3 जगह पर बम गिरे और वहां पर भी बहुत ज्यादा नुकसान हुआ है। श्रवण, अगर हम तस्वीरों में दिखाने की कोशिश करेंगे तो
चलिए कोशिश करते हैं आगे जाने के लिए। So what Mridul was pointing out that there were exactly 3 bombs that were dropped in this area. So look at the size of the crater. This is the second, and what you see there where the workers are, that's the third place. They're basically trying to take some of the evidence from these craters that have been created. And Mridul is also saying that there is more damage that has been caused on the other side. So let's try and go there. We'll have to be a little careful while we are on our way, because there have been reports of explosions, even unexploded parts. So we'll have to be a little careful while we go there. And Mridul has also been pointing out, he's got some information now from the local administration while we've been reporting here. He's spoken to the local administration to get a sense, as I was telling you, that it's about a 500 kilogram of bomb. So multiple, not just one, about 3 such bombs that were dropped. And on the other side, there is more destruction. Take a look at the kind of destruction that's taken place. That was just one household. And now where we are going, there you would basically see more destruction that's taken place. And if I can bring in Mridul, आप कुछ कह रहे थे कि ये सोवियत ईरा का कुछ यहाँ पे
हाँ बिल्कुल, क्योंकि ये जानकारी हमें जो आर्मी के पीआरओ थे जो सामने नहीं आए, उन्होंने बताया कि ये पूरा इलाका यूएसएसआर जब था, सोवियत संघ था, जब यहाँ पर आर्मी का बेस कैंप हुआ करता था और उसी वजह से उसी नक्शे को देखते हुए यहाँ पर शेलिंग की गई है। और जब शेलिंग की गई तब ये इलाका जो है रिहायशी इलाका हो चुका है। लेकिन पुरानी बिल्डिंग आप देख सकते हैं जहाँ पर यूक्रेन का झंडा और सब कुछ आपको नजर आएगा। ये पुरानी बिल्डिंग है और ये 90 के दशक में बिल्डिंग बनाई गई थी, इसलिए यहाँ पर हमला किया गया है।
तो यहाँ पे कुछ मिलिट्री के कुछ लोग भी रहते, मिलिट्री के कुछ डिप्लॉयमेंट्स यहाँ पे हो चुके थे जब यहाँ पे बॉम्बिंग।
हाँ, पहले डिप्लॉयमेंट हो गए थे। और ये जो बिल्डिंग इस समय हम देख रहे हैं जो पूरी की पूरी उड़ चुकी है, जिसके परकच्चे उड़ गए, ये बिल्डिंग जो है सरकारी बिल्डिंग है, गवर्नमेंट बिल्डिंग है। और यहाँ पर आप तस्वीरें जब देखते थे तो यहाँ पर एम्प्लॉयज़ काम करते थे, सरकारी कामकाज चल रहा था, लेकिन उसके पहले ही इसे खाली करा दिया गया था। और वहाँ पर लोग पहुँचे थे, जहाँ आप दूसरी तस्वीर दिखा रहे थे वहाँ ज़रूर लोग मौजूद थे, लेकिन ये सरकारी बिल्डिंग है, वो बोर्ड भी आपको नजर आ रहा होगा, और ये वो सोवियत संघ के पुराने जमाने की बिल्डिंग।
So as we understand that while the residential areas have also been targeted, now where we have reached, Mridul, after speaking to the public relations officer here to try and understand, this is basically a government building. And take a look at this, the impact of the bombing. In fact, we've been told that apart from the aerial bombardment, there was also shelling that took place, and this is what remains of the building. Now, this building, viewers, was a government building where government staff were present, and they were working when the bombing and the shelling took place. So it's at multiple locations, at multiple times where this bombing has taken place. So what you see behind me is the remains of a government building which has been targeted. So clearly there is an attempt that has been made by the Russians to instill some amount of fear among the Ukrainians that this is not going to be only areas of civilian areas, but also government officers who would be targeted, and that's exactly what's happening. And by the looks of the kind of damage that has taken place, one would actually understand what would be the power of the bombing or the bombs that were used, because this kind of destruction to take place, one will certainly have to use a high intensity bomb. And what the local administration was pointing out, that about 500 kilogram, and it is justified, the fact that only a 500 kilogram bomb could lead to this kind of destruction. I'll ask Rawatji to also be a little careful while he goes a little closer to give you those images of the building. This appears to be a 2-floor building, a 2-floor government building that has been completely, what you see right now is just rubbles. And this is the kind of destruction that's taking place. I'll also ask someone from the newsroom to also take over so that we can meanwhile also get in some more information and tell our viewers of exactly what's really happened. There are some locals who have also gathered here. We'll try and also speak to them while we stay with these images, because these are the latest images of a bombing as recently as in the last 24 hours that has happened. And as we've been showing you, civilian areas were targeted, 30 households, and now this is the government building that we have come to, which has been completely destroyed because of the bombing that was carried out by the Russian troops.
All right, Shravan, stay safe, and thank you so much for getting us all those ground updates. The situation certainly remains critical in several parts of Ukraine, especially cities surrounding Kiev. And Shravan getting us non-stop live updates from Ground Zero. Shravan, we let you go for the moment. Thank you.